All right, picking up where we left off, this is the Exam 2 review, Part 2. We're in question 14. In question 14, we're given the following graph. And we're told that the United States trades helicopters with the rest of the world at a price of $36 million per helicopter. This is my world price at $36 million. And we are asked, in the figure above, with international trade, U.S. consumers buy how many helicopters per year? To answer this, I look at the intersection of the world price and the demand function. This is 240 helicopters. So that's my answer. Easy enough. And I can see that domestic producers are going to produce 720 helicopters. Altogether, exports will equal 480 helicopters per year. Just in case we were asked that in the question, we could provide that information as well. Question 15 asks, basically, what is the definition of a tariff? A tariff is a tax that's imposed by the importing country on an imported good when it crosses its international boundary. So remember, a tariff is a tax on imported goods. Okay. Question 16. If the U.S. imposes a tariff on imported cars, then what can we say about the U.S. supply and U.S. demand functions? Are they going to shift? The answer is no. Explain this with a graph. I have some demand function. Domestic consumers are represented there. Some sort of domestic supply function representing the decisions of domestic producers. I've got an equilibrium price, an equilibrium quantity in the market without international trade. And then presumably if we've got a tariff imposed, then the world price must be below the equilibrium price. Now, if a tariff is imposed, then the effective world price increases by the amount of the tariff. Okay. And so, what occurs? Well, we can see that domestic suppliers end up increasing the amount that they produce from QS1 to QS2. Domestic consumers decrease their consumption from QD1 to QD2. And what occurs here? Well, we can see that neither the supply curve nor the domestic demand curve shift. But what happens is the price increases from P sub W to P sub W plus the tariff. And neither of the curves shift. So that's the answer there. Question 17. Increasing a tariff will blank the domestic quantity consumed of the good, while blank the domestic production of the good. We just answered this question. The tariff will decrease the domestic quantity consumed and increase the domestic production of the good. Let's move on to question 18. In this case, I'm going to just use this same graph, but I'll fill in some details here. Okay. So the equilibrium price is originally $28 per t-shirt. The domestic equilibrium quantity before international trade is 32 million t-shirts per year. With the world price, we're told that the world price is $20 per t-shirt. And at that price, 16 million t-shirts will be produced by domestic producers, Then after the tariff, 24 million produced by domestic producers. Before the tariff, domestic consumers are consuming 48 million t-shirts per year. After the tariff, 40 million. So with the tariff in place, the U.S. imports how many million shirts per year? That's going to be this quantity subtracted from this quantity. That is 40 minus 24, 16 million t-shirts. Okay. Next question uses the same graph. What is the U.S. government's revenue from the tariff? The revenue from the tariff is going to be this rectangle. That is, it's a $4 tariff. So $4 per t-shirt times 16 million t-shirts that are imported. That's going to give us a total government revenue of $64 million. Question 20. Which of the following is a true statement? That only domestic exporters benefit, or we should actually, sorry, that only foreign exporters benefit from trade. Well, in this case, we could see only foreign exporters benefit from trade. From the perspective of the country that's importing the good, well, that's not true because also domestic consumers benefit from trade. The next option, that all producers benefit from trade, but not all consumers benefit from trade. No, this is not true. Domestic producers, they don't benefit from trade. Foreign producers benefit from trade. And then the domestic consumers benefit, but not the foreign consumers. Right? They pay higher prices. Everyone benefits from trade. This is also not true because in a case where you're importing the good, domestic producers are worse off. So the option that makes the most sense is this, that free trade causes domestic producers of goods to face import competition. That's true. All right. Question 21. A negative externality occurs when blank. In this case, remember, a negative externality is defined as a cost imposed on a bystander or a third party, right? Somebody who's not buying or selling, they're not consuming, they're not producing. However, they are affected, adversely affected by this market activity in that they end up having to pay a cost as a result of somebody else's actions. And so the answer here is C. Some of the costs of producing a good are paid by someone other than the producer. Question 22. That was 21 previously. Beautification of the national highways through planting of shrubs and wildflowers will, in this case, benefit even people who do not pay. Think about this, that there are people who live in a town, they're paying taxes, and some of those taxes go to making the highways and roads look nice, planting shrubs, planting flowers, cleaning up roadsides from litter. However, there are people who drive through that town who don't pay those taxes, and yet they still benefit, right? So they're free riders. No pun intended, because they're actually driving through the town. But they're free riders because they don't pay for this beautification, yet they benefit. it's a nice drive, driving through a really pretty town. 23, in the presence of a positive externality, what can we say? Let's do a little graph here. In the presence of a positive externality, we have some demand function which represents the marginal benefit incurred or received by those market consumers, those who are actually buying or potentially buying the good. And then we've got some marginal social benefit that's higher than the marginal benefit, and this is because of the positive externality. And we've got some supply function which is equal to the marginal cost of production. It's also equal to the marginal social cost because there's no negative externality here. Now, we are here in the unregulated outcome, P1 and Q1. So we've got some initial equilibrium here, a private market equilibrium, where MC equals MB. But unfortunately, at this point, marginal social benefit is greater than marginal social cost. Then at the socially efficient equilibrium, marginal social cost equals marginal social benefit. This is where we'd like to be at Q2 and P2. Okay, so what can we say? We would like to produce more of this, and the price should be higher. So too little is being produced at too low a price. Let me be clear, I clarified this in class, but by too low a price, I'm not saying that if the government were to raise the price somehow, maybe impose a tax or something like this, that we would end up at the socially efficient outcome. It's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that prices indicate perceived value of things. If I'm willing to pay $5 for my first cup of coffee in the morning, I value that cup of coffee at a price of $5, right? It's a perceived value to me. Now, let's take the market for vaccines as an example. Lots of people who value the vaccine enough to go out and buy it, and they get vaccinated, but they're one less person who can contract and transmit that virus to you. They've made you probabilistically a little safer, right? Because you have a lower probability now of contracting the virus yourself. When lots of people get the vaccine, that makes you significantly safer, assuming the vaccine is effective. And so there are many people who act as free riders in this type of example because of the positive externality that exists. And so what I'm saying is that the market indicates a price that's too low in that it doesn't accurately represent the value of this good to society. And so government could subsidize the vaccine, make it cheaper, actually lower the price so that more people would get the vaccine, and government would be, of course, subsidizing the cost. Right? So they'd be paying some of this price, but we could end up at the socially efficient outcome as a result of the policy, and then we would have an accurate depiction of the value of this vaccine to society. So we've got, in question 24, we've got a market with a supply function that's equal to the marginal cost of production. Above it is the marginal social cost, and we've got a demand function represents the marginal social benefit, which is also equal to the marginal benefit of those consumers that those consumers receive from consuming the good. The unregulated outcome will occur where marginal benefit equals marginal cost. But the socially efficient outcome is where marginal social benefit equals marginal social cost. Clearly, we've got the presence of a negative externality. This is our external cost. Let me fill in the numbers we're given here in the problem. It's 4, 2, and this is 100, 150, and 50 we're given. And this is 200. Okay, so clearly we have a external cost at a quantity of 4. We could call this our marginal external cost, and it is equal to $100 per ton. These are measured in tons at a quantity of 4. So that should be our answer. That there is a marginal external cost equal to $100. So referring to the same graph in question 25, this graph shows the marginal social benefit, marginal private cost, and marginal social cost of producing steel. If the market is competitive and unregulated, how many tons of steel will be produced? The answer, 4. Referring to this same graph, if the market is competitive and unregulated, what is the size of the deadweight loss? The deadweight loss is this triangle here. We're in overproduction, producing too much at too low of a price, and the deadweight loss, here in brown, I'll do the height of this triangle, is equal to 1/2 times base times height. The base is the yellow line, 100. The height is that brown dotted line, 2. So this is $100 of deadweight loss. I'll skip to 20. Let's see. This was 26 that we also just answered. I'm going to skip to 28 since it also applies. Well, actually, no. No, it doesn't. Excuse me. We'll just continue on. Question 27. This is a review of the Coase theorem, and I'll just list out, the Coase theorem basically argues that you can solve problems of negative externalities by assigning private property rights to one of the interested parties. But it can only work if a certain number of conditions hold. The first is that property rights exist and are enforced. Second, that transaction costs are small, or negligible. And third, that a small number of parties are involved. Okay, so in the question we're given conditions 1 and 3, but condition 2 is, the wording is slightly different. In the problem, it says transaction costs are measurable. That is not one of the conditions that must hold for the Coase theorem to work. And so the answer is that conditions 1 and 3 are conditions of the Coase theorem. There's a definition here. Question 28. In the case of a positive externality, which of the following is true? That is, at the unregulated market equilibrium, what would we expect to find? This is a positive externality, so we've got the following demand function, the marginal social benefit function, and then some supply function, which equals the marginal social cost function. we're going to be here at equilibrium A. This is the private equilibrium outcome at Q1 and P1, but we want to be here at Q2 and P2, right? Because we want to be where marginal social cost equals marginal social benefit. However, we're going to be at A, where marginal cost equals marginal benefit. So private costs equal private benefits at this level of output. However, the marginal social cost is less than the marginal social benefit at this outcome by the amount of the positive externality. Right. Okay, let's keep going. Question 29. Those opposed to fracking, a method of extracting natural gas through breaking up underground rocks with chemicals and water, warn that this method might pollute nearby sources of drinking water. If this pollution occurs, one way of reaching efficient production levels is by setting a Pigovian tax. To achieve efficiency with this tax means that the tax must equal blank. So just draw a market here. So we've got a negative externality. Let's suppose we've got a supply curve, marginal cost curve. We have some marginal social cost curve. Then we have a demand function, which represents the marginal benefit of consumers as they consume various quantities of the good, and a marginal social benefit function, which is equal to that. And suppose we've got some Q1 at which we're current, and P1. This is the private market equilibrium, A. But remember, we want to be at B. Q2 and P2. Right, now the size of the marginal external cost is this, right? Marginal external cost. Okay, but we need to apply a tax that's going to get us to this equilibrium outcome of B, which means that I need to apply a tax. This is S with a tax equal to S plus tax. It's my hypothetical supply function there. And this is going to get us to where we need to be. So in this example, I just showed you a situation where the marginal social cost curve and the supply curve have different slopes. So you can see that it's not always that the tax needs to equal the marginal external cost. This is sometimes true, but in this case, it's not true. That the size of the tax is actually this distance here in blue. And so in this case, the answer to the question is that to achieve efficiency, the tax must equal the marginal external cost, not at Q1. Right? I should specify here at Q1, right? But at Q2, at the efficient, socially efficient level of output. Right? Because this is the size of the tax, but it's also the size of the marginal external cost at Q2. Right? The marginal external cost is changing as we move up and down, right? As we increase the quantity, the marginal social cost it is also increasing at a faster rate than the marginal cost of production for firms. And So we know we could have different levels of the marginal external cost at different quantities. So to be more accurate, this is the answer. Okay. So I'm going to pause the video here and I'm going to come back for part 3.